Alright guys, Murph's here. And today I want to launch back into a series that has kind of gone dormant on the channel. It actually stemmed from a couple years ago where I was doing a comparison of World War II rifles. And today we're going to be making another edition with this Swedish M38 Mauser chambered. Now, longtime viewers of the channel will note that I have previously reviewed this rifle and its cartridge, and I will put the links in the description for those videos. However, I have not necessarily put them up against other rifles from the same time period. Now, with the World War II rifle comparison series, we do have some caveats we do need to go ahead and kind of delve into. First off, guys, I have a tendency to be long-winded, and though I have already reviewed this rifle, and I will be omitting, for that reason, I will be omitting both the large portion of the history of this rifle as well as a lot of its features, because those were covered in the previous video. Check out that video if you want more of that information. However, there will still be plenty of rabbit holes, I'm sure. So with that being the case, if I'm taking too long through any particular section, go ahead and check the description where you will find chapters have been outlined. You can go ahead and jump to what information it is that you want to consume and then go on about your day. Time is precious, and I'm not looking to take any more of your time than what you are willing to give me. Now, in addition to that, guys, it's not a big channel. I do not have the access to large private collections or museum collections and stuff like that, like CNR Arsenal or Forgotten Weapons does. So I can really only get the rifles that I can resource. Previously, the channel was previously the comparison was done completely out of the collection of a friend of mine who had the ability to be able to provide one rifle per major player in World War II. Now, this rifle is coming out of my own personal collection, and you will note that this is not a major player in World War II. However, I don't see why we shouldn't also discuss some of the rifles that were kind of on the sidelines like this. We'll get into that more here in just a little bit. All right, I think that pretty much covers my basic caveats and such. Why don't we go ahead and get into the history of this rifle. It's probably better to call it background in this case because we're not going into full-on history. This rifle was adopted in 1938, and actually some existing supplies of the previous rifle pattern, the 1896 long rifle, would be cut down into this formula because this is a short rifle pattern. Now, what is a short rifle? A short rifle is an intermediate length between a carbine and a rifle, which still gives enough ballistic advantage to the average infantryman to be able to engage out to long distances while also being light, short, and compact enough in order to be used by guys who don't have the frontline duty of shooting at the enemy, like artillerymen or engineers or something along those lines. Now, the converted 1896s would be referred to as Type 1s, and then the actual manufactured 1938s or M38s would be considered the Type 2s, though there is no actual, that's just kind of a colloquialism. There's no actual designation for that in any book or any military designation for that from the Swedish military. Now, this rifle would come on the scene right as World War II was starting to pop off. And though they are a late adopter of the short rifle pattern, they are at least not the last adopter of the short rifle pattern. Better late than never. Russia still utilizing the Mosin Nagant long rifle well, pretty much all throughout World War II. Now, at the start of hostilities, the Swedes would actually supply the Finns with several thousand 1896 long rifles and 1894 carbines. These would be issued to Finnish rear echelon troops in order to be able to free up rifles and their associated ammunition with the front. It is suspected that the 1896 was supplied to the Finns because the 1938 was not in full production yet. However, I would bet even if the rifle had been produced for a couple of years, they still would have provided previous pattern rifles instead of whatever it is their best and brightest would be. That's a pretty common trend. Well, we're surplusing these out. Why are we keeping them around? Those guys need rifles over there. Let's send them our surplus rifles. One of the great things about the Swedish move to this short pattern rifle was it utilized the same cartridge as the previous rifles, which meant that even if they got drawn into hostilities right off the bat, they would still have enough rifles and would not have to diversify between two different types of ammunition, which, you know, maybe Italy should have taken a page out of that book with the 7.35 and the 6.5 Carcano being used at the same time. Now, of course, the Swedes were neutral throughout the entire conflict. And in a lot of ways, it's actually more difficult to be neutral in a globe-spanning war, especially since at that point you don't really have allies, and you have to expect that everyone wants to attack you. Which, in the case of Nazi Germany, that was a reality. But the Allies, I don't really think were looking to have more enemies. I do think it's kind of interesting to sit back and think if Sweden had joined the war, what cause and effect that would have had. And I don't think it would have been significant. I do think the war would have drug on longer, regardless of what side it is that they hopped in on. Maybe it would have gotten a little bit faster if they joined the Allies, but they hopped in on the side of the Axis. I still think that the defeat of Nazi Germany was a fixed point in time. Just like the atom bomb would not be affected by this, it would most definitely be a fixed point in time. There would just be a difference of where possibly a difference of where the atom bomb was dropped in order to bring about the end of World War II. Now, that's not to say that the Swedes wouldn't have brought something. I mean, men and materiel were still very vital throughout this entire process, and having more troops on hand for whatever offensive you're planning is never a bad thing. I'm just saying that from the standpoint of tanks, aircraft, ships, things like that, if they joined the war at any point during it, they would have been behind on the developmental trend. Where already throughout World War II, you see new tanks coming out every year. You see new airplanes, it seems like every 6 months. Some sort of technological advancement is being exploited and utilized against the enemies in this cat and mouse game, this game of chess. Everyone makes a move, and then there's moves that get made against that, and all this development, all this kind of stuff. You hop in the middle of World War II, where you haven't, because I would be surprised to see, I would be interested to see, not surprised, I'd be interested to see how much intel the Swedes were managing to glean from the Axis and the Allies, as far as what was working and what was not. Now, of course, they could have been supplied equipment, but at that point, you're more of a drain on everyone else around you. Like, hey, we need Sherman tanks. Well, sick, dude, so does everybody else. Type of deal. But having rifles available, being able to move, even if you just move those troops into rear echelon positions, that frees up more troops for the front, with that cutting edge technology and all that kind of stuff, to be able to keep taking the fight to the Germans or the Japanese or wherever it is that they hopped in at. All right, that's enough with that little diatribe, that rabbit hole that we went down there. I think that pretty much covers history, other than to say that by 1944, this rifle was actually replaced by the AG-42, which was a semi-automatic rifle. Now, a lot of militaries in the interwar period were looking into semi-automatic rifles, but there were not that many adopters by World War II. The U.S. pretty much stood alone. The Russians had the SVT-38 and SVT-40. However, they would eventually be replaced in production with 1891 Mosin Nagant. Those were the more commonly produced rifle. There were large numbers of the SVT-38 and SVT-40 that were produced, but they did not replace the 1891. They were used alongside of. Just like the Germans developed the Gewehr 41 and 43, but they never replaced the Kar 98K. That was the plan, but that was never fully realized. They just needed rifles in general. So keep the production lines flowing, and we'll eventually, if the war finally turns our way, get the opportunity to be able to switch over to the semi-automatic rifle. It is interesting to me to see one of the neutral powers spend the time to develop a semi-automatic rifle during World War II. So this was more or less a stopgap. And this never really got to see any type of fighting, which is kind of unfortunate if you think about it, because it is a well put together rifle. All right, guys. Now that most definitely covers history. Why don't we go ahead and get into skipping over features and getting to our grading criteria. Now, our grading will be done over 4 different categories, that being ergonomics, features, firepower, and accuracy. So, with that being the case, each one of these will get 5 points. That's the next thing. I just realized that I didn't bring the accuracy target with me, but I will roll in a picture once we get to that portion. That's way ahead of where we are right now. So each one of these categories will be worth 5 points with a possible 20 points overall. Now, I'm a pretty tough grader, so no rifle has achieved a perfect score. Let's start off with ergonomics. All right, so this is a fairly handy package. It's not light, it's still made of wood and steel, so it's relatively heavy, but it does handle nicely up into the shoulder and all that kind of stuff. This is a very easy to wield rifle, and that's what I appreciate about short rifle patterns. In general, I like short rifles. I've always been a big fan of kind of compact, svelte designs in rifles. That's why I have a bunch of SBRs and look forward to getting more SBRs in the future. That's why I really like lightweight, short setups like the M1 carbine and all those types of things. So this is definitely a handy rifle. It's just not a terribly lightweight rifle. We do have handguards over top of the barrel so that if you have to choke up for bayonet train or for bayonet fighting, or you're just choking up to take shots and all that kind of stuff, you're not going to burn your fingies in the middle of combat should this barrel get hot. We have these very long, very deep grooves, which are very easy to grasp and get your fingers in there and really pull this rifle into your shoulder whenever it is that you're shooting. And you can also choke back on these if you're shooting from like the prone or something along those lines. Whatever it is you need to do, these are definitely long enough to be able to satisfy it. Now we do have a straight stock, which I am not a fan of. I much prefer semi-pistol grips. It gives me something else to be able to pull the rifle back into my shoulder with. Now, the bolt is a turn-down bolt handle, which is my preferred in that it's going to be less likely to snag on things if I have it slung over my back. However, I do lose some mechanical advantage if I should have like a swell cartridge casing or something along those lines. Our buttstock is lightly cupped, but it actually kind of conforms to my shoulder really well. I don't feel like it slips around a lot in shooting this. I have other rifles that have more of a sloped shape to the butt, and they do have a tendency to kind of crawl their way down my shoulder if I'm doing like a more rapid engagement. Really, for the time period, ergonomics wise, this rifle is more or less standard. I do dislike the lack of a semi-pistol grip, but I do love the finger grooves, so we'll give this a 3 out of 5. All right, features. We do have a threaded muzzle on the end of the barrel here. This is actually for the addition of a firing adapter. The Swedes would train with wooden bullets in these rifles, but they didn't necessarily want the wooden projectiles to potentially go out and hurt somebody during training, so they would attach what was basically a wood chipper to the end of this muzzle and chunk that up. I always thought that was kind of cool, but they're kind of expensive, and I haven't gotten around to buying one yet. Now, these Swedes took a little bit of a different approach to the stacking of rifles, and you stack these by lining up these holes set into the barrel band there, and then you run one guy's cleaning rod through all those holes, and then those rifles are now stacked. That's a pretty neat way of going about it, as opposed to having a stacking loop of some sort. I do not like that this is a bottom-mounted sling. I would much prefer side-mounted slings. It's just my favorite. This is an 1893 action, which though the Gewehr 98 cock on open action is much smoother, this is still a very smooth cycling bolt. I have absolutely no complaints. I can actually run this rifle fairly quickly for a manually operated bolt action rifle. Our safety is the typical Mauser flag type safety mounted on the bolt knob there, or over top of the striker, I guess I should say. We do have typical Mauser takedown. I mean, this is 100% a Mauser designed action. Now, I'll go ahead and talk about this bayonet real quick. This bayonet is interesting because it has a hollow grip so that it can fit over top of the cleaning rod there, and a split tang design, which normally I would say that split tang designs would be an inferior design for pretty much any knife. Honestly, you lose a lot of rigidity in your knife. However, this is a bayonet that was supposed to be used for combat. It seems that they were actually quite durable. I'm kind of interested in to know where that comes from. Now, another interesting thing that is most definitely a feature of Swedish rifles in general is that all of them, even the 1896 rifles that were produced in Germany, were built with Swedish steel. They would actually import that or export that to Germany, and they insisted that all of their rifles be built with their native steel. Now, right off the bat, you might think that that's just some sort of national pride type thing, because it's very typical for there to be national pride associated with whatever service rifle that a military puts together. Most often you see that the people who are doing the grading and all that kind of stuff want to see a homegrown design adopted. However, there's no good homegrown designs. It's not a bad runner-up to buy a rifle from Mauser, to buy a Mauser design and bolt and all that kind of stuff. But it's an interesting way of kind of taking back the nationality of the rifle by insisting that it's built with that steel. However, that steel also has some excellent corrosion resistant properties to it. And I'm not entirely sure if that was known by the Swedes or if they were just like, well, we think our steel's pretty good and we want that national identity reflected on our rifle. Use our steel. Oh, wow. This is actually like some really good steel. This is insane. Like, wow, this steel holds up for like ever, because like this bayonet, the steel on this rifle, and all that kind of, it's great. This rifle is in absolutely fantastic condition compared to other rifles that have been discussed in this series that are of a similar vintage and not in as good shape. Mauser 98K. That did not go well. Now, the last feature that I do want to talk about is the stock disc. I just find it interesting that all of these rifles came with like a report card, and you could take a quick glance at it and kind of know the condition and what the zero was and all that kind of stuff on your rifle. So I think that's neat. It's also really fun from a collecting standpoint as well, though collecting really doesn't play a portion in this discussion, in this comparison. So when it comes to features, for the most part, this rifle is pretty on par with every other bolt-action rifle in World War II. So I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. All right, firepower. Well, first off, we have a manually cycled bolt-action rifle, so it's not necessarily the fastest thing to shoot in the world. The M1 Garand pretty much takes the cake when it comes to firepower, when it comes to speed of engagement. We also have a 5-round internal box magazine fed by Mauser stripper clips. Again, par for the course for pretty much every rifle that's been developed during this time period. The M1 Garand winning out with the N-block 8-round clip. Now, some people would say that also the short magazine Lee Enfield is also beating it, but the SMLE is still fed by 5-round stripper clips, so I don't know if it's really any faster to load a gun with 10 rounds from two stripper clips and then fire it, or to load a gun twice with 2 5-round stripper clips firing in between. I don't really think the short magazine Lee Enfield is that much faster once you have to incorporate reloading. Now, the cartridge in this case, the 6.5 Swedish cartridge, is absolutely fantastic. It is a flat shooting cartridge with very great point blank range. You don't have to adjust your sights a lot in order to be able to hit targets out to distance. And we'll talk about that more once we get into the accuracy portion. But for some reason, 6.5 millimeter cartridges were not popular. They had a short rise in popularity where quite a few militaries decided that they wanted to go with 6.5 millimeter cartridges, and then very quickly they fizzled out. However, the Swedes would stick with it. And I think that was an excellent choice on their part. Flat shooting trajectory, still lots of energy, long slender bullets, less wind drift and all that kind of stuff. Absolutely. If you want to know more about the 6.5 Swede cartridge, check out my video on it. I absolutely gush about it pretty much the entire video. So this actually makes firepower a really difficult conversation, because I would say that the 6.5 Swedish cartridge is one of the better cartridges in World War II. It's not an overbearing 30 cal that has like a lot of recoil. And a lot of this is also going to be closer to 0 and all that kind of stuff. But when it comes to adjustments, you can just lay this cartridge on and it's good to go. But we are inhibited by the manually cycled action, by the 5-round box magazine, the stripper clips, and all that kind of stuff. There are a lot of things that just make this not necessarily earth-shatteringly good, as much as more or less par for the course. So I think in this case, I'm going to have to give the rifle a 3 out of 5. So with that, why don't we go ahead and talk about accuracy? I'll go ahead and roll in a picture of this rifle's target. Well, first the shooting footage and then this rifle's target. So as you guys can see here, this rifle put together a 1 15/16 inch group. So just under 2 inches. And now remember, for our accuracy portion here, guys, we shoot at 25 yards. This is entirely because the Mauser 98K, the very first video I did in this series, I was at first just going to shoot at 25 yards in order to just get the rifle on paper, get an idea of where it was that it was hitting so that I can then take it to 100 yards and do accuracy testing there. However, I could not get the Mauser 98K to touch paper at 100 yards, and I still wanted a target to be able to show you, other than to show up with a blank piece of paper and go, that's the Mauser target. I don't know what group it shot. Because I got like a bullet on this paper. So it could be 3 feet. I have no idea. So I stuck with the initial 25-yard group that I shot. That grouping was shot rather rapidly because I was just trying to get it on paper. And that's pretty much how all the rifles have been shot on this channel, about as fast as I can pick up the sights. 1 and 15/16 inches is pretty good. In fact, the only rifle that beats it is the Type 99 with its 1 1/4 inch group. The M1 Garand shot a 2 3/8. The Mosin Nagant shot a 2 7/8. The No.4 Mark I Star shot 2 3/8, and the Mauser shot like 6 inches or something. It was terrible. So this is runner-up to the Type 99, which that was an absolutely fantastic group and also a really fun rifle to shoot as well. Very light recoiling, all that kind of stuff. Really, really enjoyed shooting that. Now, one of the things that I absolutely love about this particular grouping is that was point of aim, point of impact. At that pace, at that distance, I just pretty much kept the sight on there. That's what I mean by this awesome point blank range, because there's not that much adjustment going out to 100 yards. I've shot this rifle all the way out to 400 yards off of the tangent rear sight. This rifle is amazingly accurate. And when we talk about the actual engagement distances in World War II of like less than 200 yards, this rifle would have been a monster. Because it all pretty much would have been point of aim, point of impact, or very, very near so. There's a little bit of adjustment at 100 yards. Your impact will be a little bit higher than point of aim, but you're definitely still hitting a man-sized target, no problem. You're hitting a dude in the head, no problem, at those distances. Like, hold on its chin, you're gonna get him in the face. Like, that's pretty excellent. It's one of the things that I really love about this rifle is that it would be so plug and play. Now, in addition to that, the sights. So these are very simple sights. This is just a notch rear and a blade front. The blade can be adjusted in order to help this rifle zero properly for 100 meters. But one of the things that I find interesting is I actually don't have a lot of trouble getting a hold of the sight. The other sights that I've reviewed on this channel being like the M1 Garand with its blade protected front sight and ghost ring rear sight, like that was really easy to find and build my sight picture with, as well as have like some situational awareness. Now I have to say that with this rifle I do maintain quite a bit of situational awareness. I have to bury the front sight pretty deeply in the rear sight, which allows me to be able to view a lot going on over the top of the rear sight. One of the other things that I find interesting with this kind of taller front sight is that I find if I orient the rifle into my shoulder, catch that front sight with my eyes, and then kind of drop it, almost drop it into the bucket of the rear sight, I'm pretty much on, and it makes it really fast to be able to pick these sights back up. I've had a lot of success shooting this rifle very quickly and pretty accurately, all things considered. When you, especially when you consider that to like cycle the action and all that kind of stuff, like there's a lot of movement to my sight picture, but I found that I can grab and plunge it and get right back on target with these sights. That's pretty nice, especially with the buttstock not necessarily allowing it to slip all over the place on me. That makes this really easy to fight with. So, I think in this case, when we talk about accuracy in conjunction with the cartridge, like we did in firepower, this rifle winds up with a 4 out of 5. The only thing really holding it back in this case is that I do wish that I had a little bit more. I feel like I have, because of how long I've shot this rifle, I've had the time to be able to figure out how to grab that front sight and get it dropped into the rear. Had I had the same amount of time as some of these other rifles, I maybe would have praised their sights more than I did. That's kind of the end state on that one. All right, guys, this might actually be the shortest episode in the World War II comparison series. So that's pretty awesome. But I think that pretty much covers my thoughts on this particular subject. I hope you guys found this interesting, and have a good day.